The sky over the desert was red, not soft red, but deep and burning, like the land itself was wounded. The sun was slowly sinking behind the dry hills, and long shadows stretched across the open sand. The wind moved gently, carrying dust, heat, and silence. It was the kind of evening when the Wild West felt endless and cruel, where life could be taken as easily as a breath. In that vast emptiness, a single sound suddenly broke the silence, a desperate human cry. The cry came from a young Apache girl. She was not a child, but she was not old either. Her hands were tied tightly behind her back with thick rope that cut into her skin. Her feet were bare, scratched and bleeding from running across sharp stones and dry thorns. Her long black hair was loose and messy, sticking to her face with sweat and tears. Her clothes were torn, dusty, and stained with fear. She stood alone near a dry ravine, shaking, knowing she had nowhere left to run. Her name was Naya. She had been running since morning. Running from men who enjoyed fear. Men who laughed at pain. Men who said death should come slowly. Every step she took, she felt their shadows behind her. Her lungs burned, her legs felt weak, but her heart refused to stop. She did not want to die like that. Not upside down. Not screaming. Not begging. "They will hang me upside down until dying," she cried again, her voice breaking. The words came out mixed with sobs. She was not speaking to anyone she could see. She was speaking to the empty land, to the sky, to fate itself. She fell to her knees, the rope pulling her arms painfully. Tears rolled down her dusty face and dropped into the sand, quickly disappearing, like her hope was about to do. At that moment, far away on the open plain, a lone rancher was riding slowly on his horse. His name was Caleb Hart. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a hard face shaped by years of sun, loss, and silence. His clothes were plain, his hat pulled low, his eyes always watching the land. He rode alone because he trusted no one. The West had taught him that people brought trouble, and trouble brought death. Caleb was thinking of nothing when the sound reached him. At first, he thought it was the wind. Then he heard it again. A woman's cry. Broken. Afraid. Real. His horse slowed as if it felt the fear too. Caleb stopped and listened. The cry came again, clearer now, cutting through the air like a knife. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. Long ago, he had promised himself never to stop for screams. Screams had cost him everything once. He had stopped before. He had tried to help. And he had paid with blood. Since then, he rode past trouble. Past pain. Past people. That was how a man survived in the Wild West. But this cry was different. Caleb turned his horse toward the sound, his jaw tight. Each step closer felt heavier than the last. The sky grew darker, the red fading into deep orange. When he finally saw her, his breath caught. The Apache girl was on her knees, tied, shaking, her head lowered like she had already accepted death. She looked up when she heard the horse. Her eyes were wide, dark, and filled with terror. For a moment, she thought the men had come back. Her body trembled harder. Then she saw his face. Not one of them. A stranger. A white rancher. Alone. Hope and fear fought inside her chest. "Please," she whispered, then cried louder. "Please help me. They are coming back. They want to hang me upside down until I die." Her voice cracked completely. All strength left her body, and she collapsed forward, the rope digging into her wrists. Caleb stayed on his horse, watching her carefully. The desert was quiet again, too quiet. He knew men like the one she described. He knew what they did for fun. He knew helping her would bring blood. Maybe his own. The wind blew between them, carrying dust and pain. Caleb finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "Who did this to you?" The girl swallowed hard. "Bad men," she said simply. "They killed my brother. I ran." Caleb felt something move inside him, something he thought was long dead. The red sky above them looked like it was bleeding. The sun touched the horizon. And in that moment, Beneath the dying light, the lone rancher faced a choice that would change both their lives forever. Night fell slowly over the desert, as if the land itself was tired of watching suffering. The red sky faded into dark purple, and then into black, leaving only scattered stars above the empty plains. The wind grew colder, whispering through dry grass and broken rocks. Caleb Hart rode beside the Apache girl in silence, her hands still tied, her steps weak but steady. He had not freed her yet, not because he did not care, but because trust was dangerous in the West. They stopped near a group of low rocks where the land dipped and offered some cover. Caleb helped her sit and finally cut the rope from her wrists. The moment the rope fell, she pulled her arms close to her chest, rubbing her skin, wincing in pain. Deep red marks circled her wrists like cruel memories that would not fade. "My name is Naya," she said softly, not looking at him. "Thank you for stopping." Caleb nodded but did not answer right away. He was building a small fire, his movements slow and careful. Fire meant warmth, but it also meant light, and light could bring danger. Still, the girl was shaking, and the night air was cold. He chose fire. Caleb Hart was a man shaped by the past, but not owned by it, or so he told himself. He had once been kind. Once believed that helping others mattered. Years ago, he had a small ranch, a wife who smiled easily, and a future that felt safe. Then one night men came. Thieves. Drunk. Angry. Caleb had tried to talk. Tried to stop it without blood. That mistake had cost him everything. When the sun rose, his home was ashes, and his heart was empty. Since that day, Caleb lived by one rule: never get involved. As the fire caught, its soft light showed Naya's face clearly for the first time. Dirt streaked her cheeks. Her lips were cracked. But her eyes were strong, even after everything. She sat straight, like someone who refused to be broken. That strength made Caleb uneasy. "You should go," he said finally, his voice firm. "Far from here." Naya looked up, fear flashing across her face. "They will find me," she said. "They always do." Caleb stared into the flames. He knew she was right. Men like the one she described did not forget. They hunted, not just for money, but for control. For pleasure. And they hated losing. "Why were they after you?" he asked. Naya took a deep breath. "They came to our camp. Wanted land. When my people said no, they burned our homes. My brother fought back. They killed him in front of me." Her voice shook, but she did not cry. "They kept me alive because they wanted to make an example." Caleb's hands clenched. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks into the air. The past knocked hard at his chest, demanding to be remembered. He pushed it down, the way he always did. "You owe me nothing," Naya said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "You saved me once. That is enough." Caleb looked at her, surprised. Most people begged. She did not. That made it harder. He stood and walked a short distance away, scanning the dark land. Every sound felt louder at night. Hooves. Voices. Gunfire. He knew they were coming. And when they did, walking away would mean leaving her to die. Caleb laughed quietly, without joy. "Funny thing about the past," he muttered. "It never stays buried." He returned to the fire and sat across from Naya. "If they come," he said slowly, "things will get ugly." She nodded. "I am already ugly with fear," she said honestly. That answer struck him deeper than he expected. For years, Caleb had told himself he did not care. That the world could burn and he would keep riding. But as he watched this young woman sit by the fire, alive only because he had stopped, he felt the lie crack. Somewhere in the distance, a horse neighing echoed faintly. Naya froze. Her eyes filled with terror. "They are close," she whispered. Caleb stood, resting his hand on his gun. His face was calm, but his heart beat hard. He was no longer the man he had been before the fire took his life apart. He was harder now. Faster. Deadlier. And maybe, just maybe, That was exactly what the night needed. Under the cold stars, Caleb Hart realized something he had tried to forget. He did not owe the past anything anymore. But the present was standing right in front of him, and it was asking for courage. The wind carried the smell of danger, and the desert waited. The night was no longer quiet. It felt heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. Far beyond the firelight, shadows moved across the desert. The sound of hooves slowly grew clearer, mixing with low laughter carried by the wind. These were not tired riders or lost travelers. These were men who enjoyed the dark, men who believed night belonged to them. Naya heard them before she saw them. Her body stiffened, and her fingers dug into the dirt. Fear rushed back into her chest so fast it stole her breath. She had heard those voices before, laughing while her people cried, joking while blood soaked the ground. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "They have found me." Caleb Hart did not move. He stood still beside the dying fire, his eyes fixed on the black horizon. He had been expecting this moment. The West always collected its debts, and tonight it had come riding hard. He slowly stepped forward, placing himself between Naya and the open land, his wide shoulders blocking her from view. 5 men emerged from the darkness. Their horses were strong, their saddles worn, their faces rough and cruel. Guns hung low on their hips, and smiles curved their mouths in ways that made the skin crawl. At their center rode a tall man with cold eyes and a thin beard. He leaned back in his saddle like a king who knew no law would touch him. "Well now," the leader said, his voice smooth and mocking. "Looks like our little bird found a new cage." The men laughed loudly. One spat into the sand. Another scratched his beard, eyes locked on Naya like she was an object, not a human soul. Caleb kept his voice calm. "Turn around," he said. "Ride away." The leader raised an eyebrow, amused. "And who are you to tell us what to do, rancher?" Caleb did not answer. His hand rested near his gun, not threatening, not shaking. "Just ready." The leader's smile widened. "That girl belongs to us." She ran. "And you know the rule for runners." He leaned forward, eyes shining. "We hang them upside down. Let the blood rush to the head. Let fear drip out slow." Naya let out a broken sob. Her knees gave way, and she fell to the ground behind Caleb, clutching his coat like a lifeline. "Please," she cried. "Please don't let them take me." The men laughed again, louder this time. Caleb felt the weight of her fear through the cloth of his coat. His jaw tightened. He had heard enough. The past roared in his ears, screams, flames, begging voices that had gone unanswered. He would not hear them again. "She's not going anywhere," Caleb said. The leader sighed, pretending disappointment. "Shame," he said. "I was hoping you'd be smart." The leader lifted his hand. Everything happened at once. Caleb drew first. The sound of his gun cracked through the night like thunder. One man fell from his horse before he even understood what was happening. Chaos exploded across the desert. Horses screamed and reared. Guns fired wildly, flashes of light cutting through the dark. Caleb moved with deadly focus. Every shot was clean. Every step was sure. Years of pain guided his hands better than any teacher ever could. He did not shout. He did not curse. He simply acted. Naya crawled behind the rocks, covering her ears, her body shaking as the sounds of death filled the air. She prayed silently, not knowing who would still be standing when the noise ended. One outlaw tried to flank Caleb, laughing as he ran. Caleb turned and fired. The laughter stopped forever. Another man charged on horseback, gun raised high. Caleb rolled aside as the shot missed him and fired back. The rider crashed into the dirt, motionless. Within moments, the desert grew quiet again. Only one man remained, the leader. He had fallen from his horse and was crawling across the sand, his face pale, his hands trembling. His confidence was gone, replaced by pure fear. "Wait," the leader begged. "We can talk." Caleb walked toward him slowly, his boots crunching on the sand. He looked down at the man who had loved cruelty, who had laughed at pain. You talked enough, Caleb said. The leader's eyes darted toward Naya. She's just an Apache, he spat. Not worth. The gunshot echoed sharp and final. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Caleb lowered his gun. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded. He turned and saw Naya slowly rise from behind the rocks. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock and relief. It's over, Caleb said quietly. Naya took a shaky step toward him. Tears streamed down her face, not just of fear, but of release. The men who haunted her nightmares lay still beneath the stars. The desert wind passed over them, carrying away the laughter of cruel men. But deep inside both of them, they knew this night had changed everything. The silence after the gunfight felt strange, almost unreal. The desert, which moments ago had been screaming with gunfire and fear, now stood still under the cold stars. Smoke drifted slowly through the air, mixing with the smell of dust and blood. The fire had nearly died, its weak glow shaking in the wind, like it too was afraid to stay alive. Caleb Hart stood alone in the open, his gun still in his hand. Around him, the bodies of the outlaws lay scattered across the sand. Their horses had run off into the darkness, leaving behind broken saddles and deep marks in the earth. The men who had laughed so loudly were silent now, their cruelty ending where it belonged. Naya stepped forward carefully, as if the ground itself might betray her. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to move. Each step took her past the men who had hunted her, hurt her, and promised her a slow, painful death. She did not look at their faces for long. She did not need to. Their power over her was gone. She stopped a few steps away from Caleb. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Words felt small compared to what had just happened. It's really over, Naya said finally, her voice quiet, almost unsure. Caleb nodded. For tonight, he replied. That answer sent a chill through her. She understood the West was never truly finished with anyone. Violence traveled fast, and death left long shadows. Still, this moment mattered. She was alive. And that was something she had not believed possible an hour ago. Naya's strength suddenly left her. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, her body shaking uncontrollably. The fear she had been holding inside finally broke free. She covered her face and cried deep, painful sobs that came from somewhere far beyond tears. Caleb moved without thinking. He knelt beside her, awkwardly at first, then rested a steady hand on her shoulder. He did not tell her to stop crying. He knew better. Some pain needed to be released before it could fade. They wanted to enjoy it, she cried. They wanted me to suffer. Caleb's eyes darkened. They won't hurt anyone again, he said. When her tears slowed, Caleb stood and returned to the fire. He added more wood, building the flames back up. The light grew stronger, pushing the darkness away little by little. Fire always did that. It destroyed, but it also protected. Caleb understood that better than most. He checked the area carefully, moving from body to body, making sure there was no danger left. One man was still alive, the leader. He lay on his back, blood spreading across his chest, his breath shallow and broken. His eyes followed Caleb with terror. You didn't have to," the man whispered weakly. Caleb looked down at him, his face hard. "You chose this road." The man tried to laugh but failed. "Mercy," he begged. "Please." Caleb thought of Naya's words. Upside down. Slow. Fear dripping out. He thought of his own past, of mercy given too easily and paid for with blood. He felt no pleasure, only a deep tiredness. "No," Caleb said simply. He turned away, leaving the man to his fate. The desert would finish what Caleb had started. When Caleb returned to the fire, Naya was watching him closely. There was fear in her eyes, but also something else, respect, and maybe understanding. She knew what kind of world this was. She knew what survival demanded. "You did not enjoy it," she said quietly. Caleb shook his head. "No." They sat by the fire, the warmth slowly easing the cold that had settled into their bones. The night stretched on, long and heavy, but for the first time, it did not feel completely hostile. Naya stared into the flames. "I thought I would die tonight," she said. "I accepted it." Caleb poked the fire with a stick. "So did they," he replied. The wind shifted, carrying away the last sounds of suffering. Above them, the stars watched without judgment, the same stars that had seen countless deaths and just as many acts of courage. Blood soaked into the sand, dark and silent. By morning, the desert would begin to erase the signs, the way it always did. But for Caleb and Naya, this night would not fade so easily. It marked a turning point, a moment when fear was faced, and cruelty was answered. As the fire burned strong again, two survivors sat beside it, knowing that the worst had passed, but also that the road ahead would not be easy. The West had tested them both, and neither had broken. The fire burned low and steady, its soft light moving gently across the rocks and sand. The worst of the night had passed, but sleep did not come easily. The desert was quiet again, yet the silence felt full of memories, not peace. Caleb and Naya sat across from each other, the space between them small but careful, as if both were unsure how close they were allowed to be after surviving such darkness. Naya stared into the flames, her eyes red and swollen from crying. The fire reflected in them like broken stars. For a long time, she said nothing. She held her knees close to her chest, her body wrapped in a blanket Caleb had given her. It smelled of dust and smoke, but it was warm, and that mattered. Caleb watched the land around them, alert even now. He added another piece of wood to the fire, the crackling sound filling the silence. He had learned long ago that danger did not always come loudly. Sometimes it waited, quiet and patient. "I did not think I would live past today," Naya said at last. Her voice was soft, like she was afraid it might break again. "I was ready to die." Caleb looked at her then, really looked at her. "Being ready doesn't mean wanting it," he said. She nodded slowly. "I did not want to die like that. Hanging. Watched. Laughing men." Her hands shook slightly as she spoke. "I begged the spirits to make me strong. But I was so afraid." Tears returned to her eyes, and this time she did not fight them. They fell freely, sliding down her cheeks and dropping into the dirt. She did not hide her face. She let herself be seen. Caleb felt a tightness in his chest. He had seen many people cry, but this was different. These were not tears of weakness. They were tears of survival, of pain held too long. "My brother," Naya continued, her voice breaking. "He stood in front of me. He told me to run. I heard him scream when I was already far away." She covered her mouth, trying to stop the sob that escaped. "I did not even get to bury him." Caleb closed his eyes. The firelight flickered over his face, showing lines carved by regret and years of silence. "I know what it's like," he said quietly. "To leave someone behind." Naya looked up at him, surprised. "You lost family too?" Caleb nodded once. "A long time ago." He did not explain further. He did not need to. Pain recognized pain without words. For a while, only the fire spoke. Sparks rose into the night sky, disappearing as quickly as they were born. The desert felt less cold now, but the memories were heavy. "Why did you stop for me?" Naya asked suddenly. "You could have ridden away." Caleb thought carefully before answering. "I almost did," he admitted. "But I heard your voice. And I remembered what it sounds like when no one comes." Naya lowered her head, understanding the weight behind his words. "I don't know where to go now," she said. "My home is gone. My people are scattered." Caleb stared into the flames. "You don't have to decide tonight." She hesitated, then spoke again, more quietly. "Will you leave me?" The question hung in the air, fragile and honest. Caleb felt something shift inside him. For years, he had chosen to walk alone, believing it was safer. But sitting by the fire with this woman, he realized loneliness had its own cost. "No," he said firmly. I won't leave you. Naya's breath caught. More tears fell, but these were different. Softer. Grateful. Thank you, she whispered. They sat closer now, the fire between them like a shared promise. Not of love, not yet, but of protection. Of staying. As the night deepened, Naya finally leaned back against a rock, exhaustion pulling her eyes closed. Her breathing slowly evened out. She slept, for the first time in days, without fear of being dragged away. Caleb remained awake, watching the fire and the land beyond it. The past still lived inside him, but it no longer felt like a chain. Helping Naya had not healed him, but it had reminded him that his heart was still alive. Tears had fallen by the campfire that night, washing away some of the darkness. And as the fire burned on, two broken lives rested under the same sky, finding strength simply by not facing the night alone. Morning came slowly, like the desert was unsure if it wanted to wake up. Pale light spread across the sand, touching the rocks and dry grass with a cold glow. The fire had burned down to soft embers, and the night's horrors felt distant but not gone. In the Wild West, danger did not disappear with daylight. It only changed its shape. Naya woke first. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory rushed back, running, ropes, laughter, guns. Her body stiffened, but when she looked around, she saw Caleb sitting nearby, awake, watching the land. His presence calmed her racing heart. She was still alive. You didn't sleep, she said quietly. Caleb shook his head. Later. They shared what little food he had. Dry bread. Water from a worn canteen. It was not much, but after days of fear, it felt like a gift. When they stood to leave, Naya hesitated, looking toward the open desert. They may send more men, she said. Those ones had friends. Caleb nodded. That's what worries me. They traveled carefully, keeping low, avoiding open ground when they could. The west stretched endlessly around them, beautiful and cruel at the same time. Every hill looked like it could hide danger. Every sound made Naya flinch. The land itself felt like an enemy, testing them with heat, thirst, and fear. By midday, the sun burned hard overhead. Naya's steps grew slower. Her wounds ached, and her fear drained her strength. Caleb noticed and slowed his pace without saying anything. He gave her water more often than he took it himself. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said once. Naya forced a weak smile. I learned that being weak gets you killed. Caleb did not argue. He understood too well. As they crossed a narrow valley, Caleb suddenly raised his hand. He listened closely. Hooves. Distant but real. Naya's face went pale. They're coming, she whispered. Caleb pulled her behind a cluster of rocks. From there, they watched three riders move across the ridge far away. Too far to see faces, but close enough to know trouble followed them. They're tracking, Caleb said. Smart ones. Fear crawled back into Naya's chest. I told you. They won't stop. Caleb's eyes hardened. Then we keep moving. They changed direction, heading toward rougher land where horses struggled and ambush was possible. Every step was tense. Naya stumbled once, and Caleb caught her before she fell. For a moment, they stood very close. She could feel his steady breath, his solid strength. Sorry, she whispered. Don't be, he replied. Just stay alive. As the sun began to lower again, dark clouds gathered in the distance. Thunder rolled softly. A storm was coming. Rain in the desert could be dangerous, turning dry ground into traps. But storms also hid tracks. The first drops fell, heavy and sudden. Wind followed, strong and sharp. Within minutes, rain poured down, soaking their clothes and blurring the land. Naya laughed softly, almost in disbelief. The sky is fighting for us, she said. Caleb allowed himself a small smile. Even the West gets tired of cruelty. They found shelter beneath a rocky ledge as the storm grew wild. Lightning split the sky, and thunder shook the ground. For a moment, the fear of men faded, replaced by the power of nature. But the west never showed mercy for long. When the storm passed, the air felt cold and clean. But Caleb saw fresh tracks near the rocks. Someone had been close. Too close. "They're learning," he said quietly. "And so are we." Naya looked at him, fear still present but mixed now with something new, determination. "I won't run forever," she said. "I'm tired of being hunted." Caleb met her gaze. "Good," he said. "Because the West respects only those who stand." As they moved forward again, both knew the journey was far from over. The land had shown its teeth, and worse dangers waited ahead. But they were no longer just survivors running from death. They were becoming something else. Something the West would have to reckon with. The river appeared just before sunset, wide and slow, cutting through the land like a deep scar. Its water reflected the orange sky, moving quietly but with great strength underneath. To Naya, it looked like more than a river. It looked like a border between fear and freedom. Beyond it lay the edge of the territory, a place where the men who hunted her would think twice before following. They stood on the rocky bank, both silent. The journey had been long and painful. Every mile had taken something from them: strength, sleep, certainty. But it had also given something back: trust, courage, and a bond shaped by survival. "This is where I turn back," Caleb said at last. Naya felt her chest tighten. She had known this moment would come, yet she was not ready. She looked at the water, then at Caleb. His face was calm, but his eyes carried weight. "Across the river," he continued, "you'll find traders and small camps. Safer than where we came from." Naya nodded slowly. "You've brought me far enough," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. They stood there, the sound of the river filling the space between their words. For days, Caleb had been her shield. For nights, his presence had kept her alive. Now, she had to step forward alone. "I was afraid of this moment," Naya admitted. "Not of crossing, but of being alone again." Caleb looked away, toward the fading sun. "Being alone doesn't always mean being weak." She stepped closer. "Sometimes it does." He did not answer right away. The truth was, he feared this moment too. Letting her go meant returning to the quiet life he had chosen, the one where he did not have to care. But he had learned something on this road. Caring hurt, but it also gave meaning. "They tried to break me," Naya said softly. "Those men. They wanted my fear to be the last thing I felt." Caleb turned back to her. "But they failed," she continued. "Because you stopped. Because you stood." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. "You gave me back my voice." Caleb swallowed hard. No one had spoken to him like that in years. "You gave it to yourself," he said. Naya reached out and took his hand. It was not a romantic touch. It was firm and grateful. Human. "Still," she said, "I will remember you." The wind moved gently over the river. Somewhere far away, a bird cried. The world felt very wide. Caleb squeezed her hand once, then let go. "Cross before dark," he said. "Don't look back." Naya took a step toward the water, then stopped. She turned around one last time. "What will you do?" she asked. Caleb paused. For the first time in a long while, he did not have a clear answer. "Ride," he said finally. "Figure it out." She smiled sadly. "You're not as lost as you think." With that, Naya stepped into the river. The water was cold and strong, pushing against her legs. She moved slowly, carefully, feeling the current test her balance. Halfway across, she nearly slipped, but she steadied herself and kept going. Caleb watched every step. He was ready to run into the water if she fell. But she didn't. When she reached the other side, Naya climbed onto the bank and turned back. The distance between them felt larger than the river itself. She raised her hand in farewell. Caleb lifted his hat in return. The sun dropped below the horizon, and the sky darkened. Naya turned and walked toward the unknown, her figure slowly becoming part of the land. She did not look back again. Caleb remained by the river long after she was gone. The past still lived inside him, but it no longer ruled him. Helping Naya had not erased his pain, but it had given him direction. Finally, he mounted his horse and turned away from the river, riding toward a future that was uncertain, but no longer empty. The West had tested them both. And both had chosen to keep going.